what I do like is the way in which the state of Iowa is slowly putting an end to the scourge of public sex, okay? Because what I gotta say is, because of the way society is structured and all this other messed up stuff that goes on in society and such, what we're seeing is the legalization of gay marriage in Iowa. Is everybody behind that? I know. There's like 2 things to get people to cheer. 2 things to get people to cheer. Saying the name of the city you're in, Iowa City, and then talking about gay marriage with a bunch of liberal graduate students. Right, I'm totally behind these things too. Mainly because, the totally, screwed up way in which society is structured means that we have to think, for a long time, the only sexuality that was available for a lot of, homosexual individuals was public sex. And, this isn't a fault that you would portray or put onto them, but it is something that happened publicly as a result of the way in which society tried to push them to the margin of the periphery. And the result is that you have, an overwhelming problem with public sexual activity. And I heard a funny story from one of my friends who's in law school recently, got a law review article that was sort of dealing with the problem of public sexual activity. And this thing was unbelievably hilarious. They said they had to accept the article into the journal because what the article talked about was, it did a very, detailed, intelligent, brilliant legal analysis of, what sort of legal rules and legal arguments should govern, sex in public bathrooms. That part of the article, by all accounts, was sort of tight. Very well done. The problem came with the conclusion of the article, which sort of proposed a remedy to the problem of public sexual activity. And while understanding sort of the legal arguments that go forward and how those arguments may or may not be productive is useful and everything, the article sort of concluded with something that wasn't a particularly intelligent conclusion. The argument put forward was, okay, we have this problem with public sex. What are we going to do? Easy remedy. All public bathrooms will now be made of terrifying, powerful, thick stainless steel. And the size of the bathroom stall will now go all the way to the ground, all the way to the top, and the door will cover the ground and the floor as well. So essentially it exists as sort of a steel chamber. Also, every 30 minutes or so, if an individual remains in the bathroom for too long, it will emit a toxic gas. So essentially this person's solution to the problem of public sex was to build gas chambers. Not a particularly productive, effective, or intelligent solution to the problem. But this thing's going to get published in a law review just because it's like, hey, we have this real problem. So I just can't imagine a world in which that sort of makes sense or constitutes sensible something or other that we would particularly want to do. But, it at least makes sense to me that this would be a target of public criticism or a target of public ridicule, right? Because public sex has been in the news and it's been sort of frank. The entire Larry Craig wide stance thing, that's been pretty funny. We've got a lot of mileage out of that statement. You got the whole thing too with George Michael, which is sort of hey, this is totally dated pop culture humor, but really, who was he kidding? And so what you've got to be thinking about is the way in which this sort of, figure of embarrassment is starting to circulate, of starting to do things for people. And one weird thing is, it really makes you rethink those ads that Southwest Airlines has, that says want to get away. It's all the situations they show are sort of stuff you wouldn't be, you'd be really surprised if it happened, somebody spills their drinks all over 37 people. Want to get away? Okay, but that doesn't really happen that often. Somebody breaks their buddy's television, want to get away? Well, that doesn't really happen very often either. What happens more commonly, or there's all sorts of stuff you could do. It would be better off if they showed Larry Craig getting arrested in a bathroom in Minnesota, and they were want to get away? That would sort of resonate a little more, I think, with the population, etc. Because it would at least speak to a situation in which a public individual was sort of talked to or spoken to in a way that would be sort of down to them. The other people who sort of want to get away in this situation, right, are the people that are sort of behind our current financial crisis. And I can't really get over the fact, the way that some of these people are trying to advertise their way out of the business. The best example I can think of is these Charles Schwab ads, right? The ones that are sort of into with talk to Chuck, Oh, you want to talk to Chuck. All right. That's the way these Charles Schwab ads operate, is to sort of they tell you a narrative or they tell you a story. And so what happens at first is somebody sort of goes, okay, well, what you've got is, they show somebody and they're I just lost my entire life savings owing to the terrifying financial collapse that occurred. I lost all of my money. I have none of my money left. And then the ad is need to invest your money? Talk to Chuck. And it's Chuck, I don't have any goddamn money. Because pretty much all the people that had it in the first place spent it away, lost it. Pretty much that's the kid down the street, right, hearing that your house burned down, asking to come over and spend the night the next day. It's hey, can I come over and spend the night? Oh, sorry, your house burned down. That's not very polite. It's in fact sort of impolite and sort of rude. And I don't understand why an individual would be interested in doing that sort of thing, to begin with. But it's sort of I understand, right? Charles Schwab, they got to make their bones, make their money. People people will go to all sorts of extents to try and make their money. A good example of an institution that tries to do this is the notable yet objectionable television company, Spike Television, who basically seems to focus on producing television which will appeal only to a masculine male audience somewhere between the ages of 18 and 35 that apparently operates on the basis of a Neanderthal subjectivity. And me and my roommates were hanging out the other night, and what we saw was an ad, okay? And what the ad said was, what happens when a man tries to have sex with an electrified cow's heart? And we were like, what the hell is this? And then it said, this week on 1,000 Ways to Die. And we were like, well, probably he dies. Because, it's sort of laid out there in the ad. It gives away the punchline, which is not particularly good marketing, I must say. In fact, as far as these marketing maneuvers go, it's pretty terrifying because it sort of kills the punchline. It's like, well, the dude has sex with a cow's heart and then he dies. Well, I mean, how else would it go on a show called 1,000 Ways to Die? It's not called 1,000 Ways to Die and 7 Ways to be Survived, but be really embarrassed. Otherwise they might have some mileage to make out of that. But I mean, the whole idea of advertising in the first place is sort of corrupted by this feel that they have to, know what's new or hip with the kids. And so one manifestation of this might be that they think that it's important to report stories of exotic ways that people die. But on the other hand, you can sort of conceive of this in terms of the way Mountain Dew apparently does, right? Mountain Dew builds these entire campaign ads around the idea of valorizing the extreme. You just got to be extreme, right? So anything that occurs is ultimately extremized to the point that it involves basically chugging Mountain Dew and behaving like a go-tard, which is, one way to operate, I suppose, right? So perhaps the funniest of these Mountain Dew ads was I was at a movie, and before the movie they sort of show it used to be you go to a movie and you'd see trailers for movies and you'd be like, oh, all right, Spider-Man 9, I'm pretty excited, but now you go to the movie and you have to see a bunch of ads before you even get to the movie. And this ad, okay, I kid you not, this advertisement showed somebody bouncing down a mountain in a unicycle, okay? And it said, Mountain Dew sponsors Extreme Mountain Unicycling. And I was like, Extreme Mountain Unicycling? This is unbelievable. It's not even a sport. I can't imagine to what extent Mountain Dew is going to try and, colonize or take capture of certain other institutions in the future. Can you imagine, extreme air ballooning around the world in 80 days? Fire your helium now. Pull, elevate, balloon, power, right? I mean, this just isn't the sort of thing that Mountain Dew wants to get into, and yet they find themselves in the position of having to do this because they push themselves as the drink of the extreme person in all cases. It seems to work sometimes, it seems to work not, but mostly it seems like they just cause a bunch of Neanderthals that drink SUVs to basically get stereotyped into drinking Mountain Dew all the time, which isn't really, particularly fair to them. But, sometimes marketing is effective. One instance of marketing that I don't think is particularly effective is this sort of recent spate of advertisements that are talking about, for example, Guitar Hero, Guitar Hero Metallica Edition, or Guitar Hero Aerosmith Edition, which basically seems like they're appealing to people that were, really cool in the 1970s and the 1980s. I'm very fearful of what happens if it decides to broaden a little bit, and you get Guitar Hero Quiet Riot Edition, which just features 17 covers of Come On Feel the Noise and Bang Your Head, or maybe Guitar Hero Bright Eyes Edition, which is just what you buy if you hate your parents or something. I don't really know. So anyway, I would just like to thank everyone for giving me the time to talk here.